Welcome to a beautiful Friday. It is summer in Montreal, really nice. And I have with me today Dr. Maya Rossignac-Milon. Welcome to Nurau Talks today, Maya.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So Maya is an assistant professor at IESE Business School in Spain, I just learned today. And she holds a Ph.D. in psychology from Columbia University, as well as a BA from our very own McGill University. So she loves Montreal, has been here before. It's a really cool connection. And her research looks at the underpinnings and consequences of social connections. So something that we talk about a lot at Nurau. How do we connect with people? So what makes acquaintances and employees click with each other? How do we develop and deepen friendships with our friends and colleagues? And how do these connections influence our workplace? So meaningfulness and productivity. So Dr. Maya's work has been published in many leading academic journals and even in outlets such as the BBC and Psychology Today. And we're really interested in hearing what she has to say about shared reality, which is this big term, and perhaps we'll just dive right in here with getting you, Maya, to tell us all what you mean by shared reality. What is it and what impacts whether or not we have shared reality with someone else?
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. So basically, shared reality is the perception of having the same inner states, so thoughts, feelings, beliefs, concerns with another person about the world around you. So say you meet someone for the first time and you feel like you're really hitting it off and you're finishing each other's sentences and you just feel like you're on the same wavelength. That would be the experience of shared reality with that stranger. But you could also have it with a close partner. So say you're at a party with a friend and someone makes a joke and you share a glance from across the room, or you're in an office and you and your colleague look at each other during a group meeting in response to what someone else said. That would also be an experience of shared reality. So basically, when you feel like you see something in the world or the world at large in the same way.
Okay, and I know there's probably so much research on like what causes that to happen, because it's this magical moment almost where, you're like, oh, you see the world the way I do. What would you say, if you could just maybe touch on a few things in your research or in the research at large, what would cause that kind of shared reality moment to happen?
Yeah, so something that I've looked into are the conversational behaviors that give rise to that experience of feeling like you have a shared reality with someone else. So those behaviors are pretty face valid, like things like saying, yeah, I totally agree, or that's so true, expressing agreement, but also saying things at the same time or quickly repeating each other's sentences, or finishing each other's sentences or finishing each other's thoughts. Those kinds of behaviors tend to predict the experience of shared reality with another person.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I can, I know it's an academic term, but I'm even thinking about how it applies to moments with my husband and finishing each other's sentences. That's something that we do quite often. Cool. So I have a question from Nicole, who was our guest last time, and she asked about not just the clicking process, so like, when you click with someone, when you have shared reality, but also the unclicking process. So, say you're in a conversation with someone and you're like, we're getting along, and then all of a sudden the mic drops because you realize, well, they're a liberal and I'm a conservative, and they like say something that's totally kind of off. Has there been any research into that kind of process?
Yeah, it's so fascinating to think about that. And how you might perceive that you have a shared reality and then be confronted with evidence that you don't. And how do you respond to that?
Yeah.
So I haven't looked at that much between strangers, but I have looked at this between close partners. So specifically in romantic relationships, but I think this would generalize to any kind of close partnership where you feel like you have a sense of shared reality. And so what I've found is that when I experimentally threaten people's sense of generalized shared reality about the world at large with their partner. So basically I tell them, have them taste different foods and touch different fabrics, look at different colors and rate them. And then I give them false feedback that turns out you and your romantic partner don't see the sensory world in the same way, then people who have a sense of shared reality, who are told that, when you give them the chance to then interact with each other, they start engaging in those same behaviors that I described, strangers interacting and using when they're interacting with each other to basically reaffirm their sense of shared reality. So basically show that, no, we do see the world in the same way. And this shows that people are motivated to protect their sense of shared reality. And basically, when cracks in their shared reality appear, they're motivated to try to restore them when they then interact next. And they do all kinds of interesting things, like they start bringing up more inside jokes than they normally do. They start referencing trips that they took together or niche knowledge that only they understand, to show, no, we have this shared reality that other people might not necessarily get, that only we understand.
Wow, that's fascinating. And do you find that shared reality, or have you only studied shared reality in dyads, say like couples, or would you say that it also happens in a team setting? Because last live, Nicole talked a bit about conversational dynamics in teams and like a sense of psychological safety. Do you think shared reality could also be measured, say, in a team setting more than just two people?
Yeah, definitely. So I have, in some of my more recent work that's more organizationally oriented, I have looked at shared reality in team contexts. And so people do tend to have the sense of shared reality with their team at large. Something that's interesting is I've also measured how much people have a shared reality with each of their teammates. So looking at dyads within the team, and people there's actually like a lot of variability. So within a team, you might really have a shared reality with one teammate, but then not at all with another teammate. And so it's useful to still look at the dyadic level, even when you're looking within team processes.
Right.
And one interesting finding that I'm working on with my collaborator, Sandra Matz, that really looks at shared reality at the team level. So really having people rate how much they see the world in the same way as their team as a whole. We find that basically shared reality helps diverse teams unlock their like performance potential. So the more diverse they are, if they're able to establish a shared reality, the more that diversity predicts team performance. And so basically getting on the same page, both relationally, but also in terms of understanding and making sense of the world,
right.
That allows them to then perform better than teams that are lower on diversity.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to exactly ask that question about how shared reality applies to workplaces, because at Nurau, we're super interested in the workplace environment. And interesting to know that shared reality has an impact on performance. And I guess it would make sense that, like that connection, or how connected you feel, say, to other people in your team, or maybe even your manager, because we look at managers. I was going to ask, just from the perspective of a manager with a diverse team, what advice would you give to a manager about working towards a shared reality with an employee if, say, like they don't have similar cultural backgrounds, or it's hard really to say click with every employee? So what would you say to a manager who's trying to create that sense of shared reality?
Yeah, I think so. I think you can kind of approach this from a few different angles. One thing that I think is important to keep in mind is that your authenticity is going to then shape the extent to which the other person experiences a sense of shared reality. So I've found in some of my work with Juliana Palemer, who I know is a prior guest, that when you perceive the other person as being inauthentic, so not describing how they really feel, then you're not able to experience the sense that you share how you really feel, because you don't know if the other person's inner states that they're describing actually reflect their true inner states. So you can't then think you share those inner states with them. And so I think something that's important is to try to create these authentic shared realities as a manager, not necessarily just agree with someone if you don't authentically agree with them. So trying to be yourself and connect with them while you're doing that. And I think that something people can do is create these sort of, even if you come from different cultural backgrounds, you can still, something I'm really interested in is the extent to which in our everyday interactions, we create oops.
Yeah, you're still good.
Okay, sorry. The extent to which we create microcultures. So when we're interacting, we come up with our own little rituals, right? Like people have these private rituals that they engage in all the time, whether it's just like we grab coffee on Wednesdays at this particular place, or, we have a particular way of greeting each other, or, something funny that we call this particular project, whatever it might be. We have all these ways of like creating new cultures together.
Mm-hmm.
And I think really engaging in that process with your employees and creating these new little microcultures together that might differ from the larger macro cultures that you each come from is a way that you can then form like a special connection,
right,
with someone
even
else.
things like having team rituals or things that are specific to you as a team, I think would be really helpful in that.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. So I want to talk a little bit about workplace conflicts, just because this is something that I would say one of the main challenges with managers that come to us, and just in the literature too. And I can imagine that people have conflicts because they don't have a shared reality, or like you don't see things the same way, even if you're facing the same situation. One employee may say, "Oh, I thought this," and that doesn't agree with how the other one saw it. What do you think a manager could do when two employees don't share a shared reality? So they're kind of like a third party and trying to help other people have a shared reality. Would you say that there is something that have been shown to help in that process?
Yeah. So I mean, there's like such a big field on, conflict resolution and mediation. And so I don't want to, speak as an expert on that. But something that might be useful that I've written about is it might be useful to suggest that they go on a walk together.
Mm.
So my colleague and I wrote a paper about how walking together through all these different mechanisms can be one way that people can resolve conflicts more easily. So like one way it works is people often just spontaneously synchronize their steps. And by synchronizing their bodies and their movements, they're then more easily able to synchronize their minds, synchronize their perspective on what they're talking about. And walking also allows people to both orient outwards to the world together. And that kind of implicitly allows you to create a sense of shared reality about your surroundings, about what you're seeing, just the physical world around you, in a way that if you're just staring at each other face to face, like sitting across the table, you're in a more what's called a competitive stance, as opposed to a cooperative stance of looking outwards together at the world. And so I think, suggesting that they go on a walk together, or even maybe just using that kind of stance and trying to get them to agree about, increasingly ambiguous things. Like they can both agree that, they see a particular thing in front of them, and then just get them to gradually agree about things that are closer and closer to whatever the conflict might be.
Yeah.
But that's not something I've tested empirically.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. And such a simple little tweak of trying to create that shared reality through moving in the world together.
Yeah.
Suggestion. Yeah, it's something my husband and I do a lot. We go on a lot of walks, so maybe there's something to that. Yeah. Great. So I have a question for our next guest. Well, I would like if you could come up with a question. Our next guest is Ariana Beats from Wharton, and she looks at post-traumatic growth and what led people to overcome workplace loneliness. So I guess loneliness would be, in your terms, like would it be a lack of shared reality or something to that effect? So yeah, what would you ask her if you had the chance?
Yeah, it's such a cool field of study, because especially now more than ever, I think that's extremely relevant as people are working in more hybrid or remote workplaces. They're experiencing loneliness more and more. So it would be really interesting to know whether people can experience a sense of shared loneliness, sort of ironically, because then it's no longer loneliness, but can they almost like bond with other people over their loneliness, as opposed to bonding, say, over something that they would normally bond about to then form a social connection.
That's interesting. Yeah, for sure. We'll ask that question to Ariana. That's a wonderful question. Well, thank you so much, Maya. We are at the end of our 15 minutes, but it's been so fascinating just to hear about, I'm sure you do tons of really theoretical. I was telling Maya that I was trying to read some of the papers and just very deep into the theory. But also, I think it's really cool the experiments you do in couples and relationships and finding out more about, what causes that shared reality? How can we work towards more of that connection? I think at Nurau, we really value that connection in workplaces, and it's very connected to this loneliness that we're seeing either because of the pandemic or remote work or a lot of those, the consequences from that. So thank you for the work that you do, Maya, and we look forward to following up with your research and just seeing what you do next with shared reality.
Well, thanks so much for having me. Really enjoyed this.